The Saturday farmers market in Charleston, South Carolina, buzzed with music, laughter, and the scent of fresh bread drifting through the warm autumn air. 32-year-old Ethan Walker, an architect known for his quiet humor, wandered between colorful stalls beside his lifelong best friend, Claire Bennett, a 30-year-old elementary school teacher whose smile had brightened his life for nearly 15 years. They had met as teenagers when Ethan's family moved next door to Claire's. Since then, they had survived high school, college, heartbreaks, career changes, and countless life milestones together. Friends constantly insisted they belonged together, but both laughed off the suggestion, insisting they were simply too comfortable to risk ruining the friendship they treasured. That morning felt no different. Claire teased Ethan for spending 20 minutes choosing the perfect bag of coffee beans, while Ethan joked about her habit of buying flowers every weekend despite claiming she couldn't keep plants alive. Their playful conversations came as naturally as breathing, making strangers assume they had been married for years. As they stopped at a family-owned produce stand, the elderly vendor smiled warmly while placing fresh apples into a paper bag. Looking at Claire, he chuckled and said, "Your husband has excellent taste. You're a lucky woman." Without thinking, Ethan laughed and casually replied, "Yeah, my wife usually lets me pretend I know what I'm doing." The words were meant as nothing more than another harmless joke. Usually, Claire would have rolled her eyes or teased him back with an even sharper comment. Instead, she suddenly became unusually quiet. A soft blush spread across her cheeks as she lowered her eyes, gently twisting the handle of her shopping basket. The vendor handed them their change and wished them a happy future together before greeting the next customer. Ethan smiled awkwardly as they continued walking through the crowded market. After several silent moments, he noticed Claire avoiding eye contact, something she had almost never done around him during all the years they had known each other. Trying to lighten the mood, Ethan laughed nervously. "Don't tell me that old man actually embarrassed you. We've joked like that 100 times." Claire stopped walking beside a small flower stall. Her heartbeat felt impossibly loud as she looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. Taking a slow breath, Claire smiled shyly before whispering, "The joke didn't embarrass me, Ethan." She hesitated for another moment, then quietly added, "What embarrassed me was realizing I'd actually love it if one day that wasn't just a joke." The bustling sounds of the market suddenly faded as Ethan stood completely speechless, unable to believe the words he had just heard. For several long seconds, Ethan simply stared at Claire. The cheerful sounds of children laughing, musicians playing guitars, and vendors calling out special offers seemed to disappear completely. His mind replayed her words again and again. For 15 years, he had convinced himself she would never see him as anything more than her closest friend. Before either of them could speak, dark clouds rolled across the Charleston sky. Heavy rain suddenly poured over the market, sending shoppers running for cover. Ethan instinctively reached for Claire's hand, and together they hurried beneath the awning of a small neighborhood bakery, laughing breathlessly despite the unexpected storm surrounding them. The bakery owner welcomed everyone inside with warm smiles and the comforting aroma of fresh cinnamon rolls. Standing near the window, Ethan realized he was still holding Claire's hand. Instead of pulling away, she gently tightened her grip. Neither of them spoke immediately, yet the silence felt strangely peaceful rather than awkward. Finally, Ethan looked into Claire's eyes. "Do you know why I kept making those jokes?" he asked quietly. Claire slowly shook her head. He smiled sadly. "Because pretending for a few seconds was easier than admitting I'd wanted that to be real for years. I was terrified that telling you the truth would cost me my best friend." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I felt exactly the same," she admitted. "Every time you dated someone else, I smiled and pretended to be happy because I thought you deserved someone amazing. I convinced myself you only saw me as family, so I buried my feelings and hoped they'd eventually disappear. They never did." Ethan let out a quiet laugh, mixed with relief. "We've spent 15 years protecting a friendship that already felt like love." Claire smiled through her tears. Outside, the rain continued falling against the bakery windows, but neither of them noticed anymore. For the first time, there were no jokes hiding their emotions, only honesty between two hearts that had waited far too long. Ethan gently brushed a tear from Claire's cheek before smiling. "Can I ask you something without turning it into another joke?" Claire laughed softly and nodded. Taking a deep breath, he said. "Would you let me take you on our very first real date?" Her smile grew brighter than he had ever seen. "I thought you'd never ask." Instead of rushing home after the rain stopped, they spent the afternoon exploring Charleston together as if seeing the city for the first time. They shared coffee at a quiet cafe overlooking the harbor, walked along the historic streets, and talked about dreams they had never been brave enough to confess while pretending to be just friends. Over the following months, nothing about their friendship disappeared. It simply became deeper. They still teased each other over burnt pancakes, argued playfully about movies, and competed during board game nights. The only difference was that every laugh was followed by a handheld, a warm embrace, or a quiet reminder that they no longer had to hide how they felt. A year later, Ethan brought Claire back to the very same farmer's market where everything had changed. Near the familiar produce stand, he stopped walking and knelt on one knee. Shoppers gathered around as he smiled nervously and said, "The first time someone called you my wife, it was a joke. Today, I want to spend the rest of my life making those words true." With tears of joy streaming down her face, Claire whispered the easiest answer she had ever given. "Yes." The elderly vendor recognized them immediately and applauded with everyone else. Laughing warmly, he handed them a basket of fresh apples and joked, "Looks like I was just a little early last time." Months later, surrounded by family and lifelong friends, Ethan and Claire exchanged vows in a beautiful garden overlooking the Charleston waterfront. During his speech, Ethan smiled at the guests and said, "The greatest love stories don't always begin with fireworks. Sometimes they begin with years of friendship, one unexpected joke, and the courage to finally tell the truth." As Claire squeezed his hand, both knew the happiest chapter of their lives had only just begun.